Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 29th episode of Tried and True, a podcast hosted by Delaware War Machine. I am your host, Paul.
I'm Dan.
I'm Erica.
I'm Andy.
With Warfaire Weekend just finishing up, and then they just showed off the new Steamroller documents, thought it'd be a great opportunity for us to go ahead and talk about all that. So, what were your overall first thoughts when you saw him?
So I initially was a little bit taken aback because I thought this was a lot different than what I had expected. We transitioned to imaginary zones, so to speak, rather than the neoprene squares and circles that we've been playing with for so long. So it's a big change for me, but it's an exciting one.
Yeah, the two big things I see are it's a little bit harder to measure to things, and there are things out there on the table that you can't land on that didn't exist before, that kind of make the larger, more immobile pieces kind of annoyed.
So my initial thoughts is, one, I'm kind of glad to see the neoprene zones go away.
Yeah, there's lots of different points that we're going to be chatting about with this, and I'm stoked about it. So let's go ahead and start off by thanking all of you, our listeners, who are giving us your time to be able to listen to what we're thinking about with the new Steamroller or anything that's War Machine related. Thanks to More Than Dice for giving us another platform to share the great news. Lots of other good podcasts that are out there. Go ahead and take a look at the show notes for some of the active ones. They pop up all over the internet. And for all the patrons on Patreon, thank you for your continued support. Always appreciate what you do to help us out, be able to make good quality content. If you haven't done so already, or if you're interested in joining up with the Patreon, we'll have that linked over there in the show notes. And then finally, the community site. If you weren't aware of it, the community site is up and running.
Hey, Paul, quick announcement about the communities page. The map now has over 150 unique pins for people playing War Machine around the world. If you're listening to this and you haven't been to the community site, go check out the site, put in your location, and help us get to 200.
And if you're not on the map, get on the map so that way you can get more games to the table. Okay, and then as for current events, the store, I think, is doing their Black Friday sale. And big news with that is that they just re-released the old, preview boxes, like the Gen Con boxes, and I guess, preview army boxes. So your Brian Bloods, you can get, your... the Boom Howler with the light and the heavy, and then the Hazroth with his light and heavy, etc., etc. So I think that was a very good move as a lower barrier to entry for people who are interested in playing the game, as well as being able to supply all the bells and whistles of your magnetic models.
I mean, I think we've been pushing for the preview boxes to be a permanent thing for a while now. I think that's pretty much everybody, current players and players who want to get into the game, have been kind of...
No. I'm saying that there was actually another announcement that it was there's another box that's going to be coming of even new stuff.
Yeah, that box worries me a little bit.
I heard something about that as well. Last I read, on Facebook and Discords and whatnot, was that there was still confusion about what the final form of that would be. So take that with a grain of salt, I guess.
Yeah, the from what I read, it was they are set loadouts for either existing Jackson beasts or completely new Jackson beasts. I'm not entirely sure what the actual official word on it is, but the set loadout thing worries me if it's for the existing stuff.
No one knows what the final word on it is.
Yeah.
Whatever it ends up being, it's just, again, it's more goodies, which I'm looking forward to.
Exactly. I think the bottom line of it is that anything that exists as an extra entry point to the game is typically viewed as a good thing by our community. People want new players to be able to jump in quick, and offering more starter box options to be available for the different armies can only be a big benefit.
Yeah, I'm only concerned for the amount of SKU, right? Because they were talking about SKU bloat before, so we're now at the core army box, your expansion box, your 80 mil, and now we're going back to also getting the preview box, and now there's 4 boxes, and we're now talking about 5. So it's just, again, I guess it's treading waters on the things that we want to make sure that our local retail stores don't feel like they're overburdened with the stuff.
I'm going to say they also, I think they're doing a Black Friday promotion with the Winter Core bundle, which is the core army box, Boris and Friends, a guard tower, and the pirate defenses that were limited to the 2023 conventions.
Was it just the Winter Core box, or was it any of the core boxes?
I saw Winter Core. Is it any of them? I don't...
The Winter Core box is in the image. the text on the solicitation said any core army Mark IV starter.
Oh, that's great.
If you haven't picked up anything, go pick up some stuff. If you're know people that are interested in playing the game or that are interested, definitely like shepherd them to that area.
Yeah.
Delaware War Machine news, nothing really crazy is happening. We're going to be starting a Resurrection League this week, so we're looking forward to that. And then Erica, you say King of Coin is starting the 1st of January. You want to go do a plug for that for Nova?
Yeah, so hear ye, King of Coin is back in sesh for 2024. We did a short video showing off where all of our 16 coins are being sent to. So if you're in the area or you're coming to play at one of our local Steamrollers or conventions on the East Coast, we'll probably have a coin or two there. So the league officially runs 1 January until the 1st of August with the King of Coin finals and Prince of Pence finals taking place at the Nova Open. Yeah, so the league is free to join. We just ask that you join us on Discord. That way we can give you a special role. You get access to the spreadsheet that has all the players that are registered as well as who has the coin at that current time. And I think as of today, we have about 50 people in the league.
I'm really happy to hear that the reception was so high or was so welcomed and that you have even more people interested in starting it out this year. So that's really exciting.
Dan, and I was approached, I think, on Facebook or Discord, and I think Dan had also answered an inquiry of a couple of other metas that were interested in starting something like this.
Yeah, we had a Facebook message come in from a group out in Germany, so I thought that was pretty cool that someone across the world is interested in following that type of league that we're doing. I just think the whole physical prize moving around is such an awesome idea, and more places should do it if possible.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't somebody off in the West end up saying that they were interested, like in the Nevada area or something? Said they would love to go do it like out in the West.
I don't know if it was that way. I think there's a group in Michigan that was interested in starting up.
Maybe that was it.
And if anyone's interested, a little plug for Ye Lasersmith, Brandon and Sarah, husband and wife team. They do some amazing custom woodwork. We use them for our custom coins. I think Siege Invitational, that's where their big ginormous hammer and a lot of their prize support comes from. Hit them up. They have a store on Etsy. They are awesome. They do amazing work, good quality work. And if you're looking to run a league like this, I would definitely point you in their direction.
I was just going to say is that if you're still doing this wood coin kind of setup, is that we might have to go and maybe change our specific design so people know that this is the Nova King of Coin and not the, I don't know, Germany King of Coin or what have you. Just like someone like flies on over like, hey, I'm ready to play. It's like, oh, this is not the right one. That's
why we have the receipts on the Google Doc, okay? And that's the thing, too. So last year, all right, we got 14 out of 16 back. Not bad, not bad. But if I can get all 16 coins in DC next year, we may upgrade our coins to metal.
Can you throw in like a sick guitar riff when she says metal?
No, it's okay.
That sounds like my cat.
Okay, and with that, we're going to go ahead and get to our community spotlight, and this time we're going to go be stateside. Hello, and welcome to the Community Spotlight. On this section, I am joined by Michael Sitvarin from New York. Michael, go ahead and say hi.
Hi, how you doing?
Michael, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for taking the time to fill out the Community Spotlight section. You ended up talking to us about what you're doing off in New York. How about you go ahead and start with the introduction? You can introduce who you are and how long you've been playing for, and what the area, the local scene is like where you're at.
Yeah, I have been playing since I think about 2010. It was shortly after Retribution got introduced, and I think Mark II was fairly new. I kind of grew up playing the game around Cincinnati and have since played in Georgia for a while as well, and just recently in August moved to New York. I'm in what we call the capital region, so around Albany. And yeah, I started playing Crix way back when. Still love Crix. Picked up Retribution for a while, still have Retribution, played Legion for a bit, and just recently got into Infernals.
Nice, that's really great. How have you been enjoying with the faction hopping? Do you have a preference of which one you prefer?
I mean, I can always go back to Crix. That's like the soft and comfortable evil. So That's really nice. I switched into Retribution's really my secondary just because they had guns, and that was kind of unique and different from Cricks for a long time, especially in Mark II. And then Infernals is just, totally out of left field. So they've been a lot of fun to try and wrap my head around.
Yeah, I feel like I missed the boat when Infernals came out. I was very, very close to pulling the trigger on it, but I ended up not doing it. But I feel like it was a lost opportunity because every single time I see Infernals on the field, it just looks so much fun to go play.
Yeah.
But so you've been moving around and playing the game. Like, what is your experiences like as the edition has changed and for the past decade?
Yeah, every time an edition changes, it seems like the community gets a little bit nervous that they're gonna change all the rules and models are going to get nerfed and everything, but I feel like the game just continually grows and gets healthier. It's definitely changing. Steamroller changes all the time. Factions get split up. We get theme forces and stuff like that. But I've stayed engaged with it the whole time, 13 years, I guess. And Mark IV is new and exciting. It was scary at first, units teleporting around and stuff, but it feels natural at this point. And I hope we can glide along on Mark IV for a while, but if when and if Mark V comes around, I'm ready for it. I'm excited to see what comes next.
Well, with that, I mean, you said you're in New York right now. How about you go ahead and talk about the area? Like, what was like when you moved in? Were you or moved into the area? Was it easy to find a War Machine group, or were you met with challenges?
Yeah, I think I had just jumped onto some Facebook or Discord groups and said, "Hey, is anyone around the Albany area?" And got a few bites. There were some former players who helped get me in contact with small communities that are up and running here and figured out where some game stores were. And yeah, it seems like there were some refugees from Mark III who were kind of hanging around waiting to see how the dust was going to settle. And my main play group now was formerly just two guys who kind of played each other on and off. So I joined in, and our meta grew by for 50%. And since then we've had some kind of little flickers of other people expressing interest. We just had a former press ganger this week kind of pop his head out of the shadows, and it seems like he's getting interested in Brine Blood. So we're small but growing quickly at this rate, at least.
All right, cool. Well, that's great. And then, all right, so were you taking on the role of like the main person who's kind of like organizing this? Because you were talking about these two gentlemen that you're now playing at a public location. Like, what have you been doing?
Yeah, there's two game stores in the greater capital region area, I guess. They're both called Flipside Games. There's one in East Greenbush, which is south of Albany. And then another one closer to me in Clifton Park. Same store. I guess it's probably just a franchise. It's got two locations. And I've played at both of them. It kind of just depends on who wants to make a longer drive. But they've got tables, they've got space, they've got terrain. So we just kind of bounce back and forth between those. And and then I'm looking to travel. Me and one of the other guys are heading out to Syracuse tomorrow for an event that they've got out there. And I was out at the Sussy Scuff back in October, I think. So I'm happy to play, locally with my little meta, but also looking to travel. I'm happy to drive a few hours and get into some bigger events too.
No, that's great. That's wonderful. And I'm glad that you ended up joining up with the Susquehanna Scuffle. Didn't have the opportunity to really meet everybody who was ended up playing. Were you playing Infernals there as well?
No, that was my last hurrah of rounding out Cricks before picking up the Infernals and trying to figure out how Essence and all that stuff works.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Wonderful. Well, then I guess my question here is that if you have any of these other press gangers or Mark II players, maybe even some Mark III players are interested in getting, their feet back into Mark IV, tell us about where or what times did you play at each of these Flipside gamings and get in contact with your group?
Yeah, the main kind of source of communication we've got is we have a Discord channel. I don't know if you can just find them. It's called Capital Region War Machine. If people can get into that Discord, we've got a channel for organizing game nights, and come in, introduce yourself, and we've been playing kind of every other Wednesday, but we're not really set on days per se, and so there's flexibility there to accommodate what's going to work for people.
Your Discord is already up on the community site, so if you go and take a look, and if you go to United States, go to the New York page, you will see that the Northeast US Discord and upstate New York, as well as information about Flipside Gaming, is already located there. Is this your Crix, the one with the burnish, like the burnt umber red color?
Yeah, I think I posted a picture of, there's a Slayer maybe, yeah.
Yeah, man. That's awesome. Well, Michael, thank you so much for your time and appreciate you participating on the community spotlight. And again, we'll do our best to try to hit as many of you individuals that end up saying that, yes, you want to go ahead and share the great news of your group. And, hopefully we'll be able to get you. So, Michael, thank you again for joining us on this community spotlight. And hopefully we'll catch you the next Sussy Scuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and chat about the new Steamroller. What I thought would be good is that we kind of break this up into kind of 3 little sections. We can talk about what is the whole big deal about this Steamroller, like what is making this one different. We can then go and take a look at an in-depth kind of look at each one of the scenarios and give our thoughts about it. And then finally, we can kind of just say what Eric was talking about and saying what would this mean for TOs and EOs and what are maybe the futures of this. So let's kind of start with this, and I'm going to actually pitch this over to Dan. Did you do organized play like Steamrollers for the longest time, even before Mark III? And then can you kind of give us a glimpse of what maybe those kind of Steamrollers look like? So we can kind of talk about the evolution of how this has changed over time.
So yes, so I've been doing Steamrollers for as long as I can remember, back to approximately 2011, maybe 1 month out of 2010. You know what I mean? And I've seen most of the evolutions of the document in Mark II, and I've consistently played all through Mark III as well, now in Mark IV. So over the time, I've gone from seeing everything where an objective on the field was like a 50 millimeter base, but if your Warcaster was within 3 inches of it, they could pick it up and place it within 2 of them, and it was really great for those control backline casters that could just move this objective around to a safe place wherever they needed to, but, it did weird things to the paradigm of the game. I saw the years where we had radial deployments. I've seen models picked from your sideboard or your specialists get deployed halfway through the game on the side, but it's only in 1 out of 6 scenarios. I've seen a gambit of crazy stuff, and the rise and fall of the neoprene zones and then neoprene terrain after that in the Mark III era was really edition defining for Mark III. And I think that it's interesting to see that now that we're having Mark IV come into its own, we're moving away from that section. I kind of wonder if the community is going to, or how the community is going to respond, and what kind of new measuring devices and neoprene stuff we're going to get this edition. I'm sure there's any number of crafty engineers out there that are looking to create the next big widget. So I'm really excited to see what you guys come up with.
Yeah, so if you weren't following or if you didn't see any of the new scenario elements, Mark III scenarios, which I think we're most familiar with, we had neoprene zones, or just some kind of zone that represented like a 12 by 6 inch footprint or a 12-inch diameter circle. Those were basically your control areas with, certain models being able to score. And then you had your flags and objectives, and the objectives were whether they gave you a benefit or not, or they were just a point that you try to score by destroying your opponent's objective. And that's kind of what all of my Mark III experience was. And quite honestly, towards the end of it, I just kind of got tired of it. Just because, when looking at a narrative play or looking at a miniature game, I'm interested in the narrative aspect of it, and I don't know what the MacGuffin circle and rectangle is. I don't understand why I'm fighting for it. I just know that I need to fight for it. The flag, you can end up representing it being like a point on the battlefield, what have you and stuff. But that's what we had. And now it's shifted, as you were saying, about these 30, 40, 50, and even 20 millimeter bases that are our control objectives at this point. So this is actually very, very different. Other changes, or I think huge changes that they've had, is that there's no longer the being up by 5 at the end of your turn, or I guess out of anybody's turn. It's being up by 3 at the end of your opponent's turn. So it's giving your opponents an opportunity to score back. And we got to go see these 3 scenarios, which we'll link some images if you haven't seen them already. Did everybody want to kind of talk a little bit about the direction that the Steamroller is going? And I kind of want to start with Andy, if you don't mind. Overall, your first thoughts of the new Steamroller? What do you think?
From a play perspective or from a narrative perspective?
Overall, like, I mean, I already have like my notes down
Mhm.
what I like thought about this, but I'm interested in hearing like what you think, because I know that you look at this as like this is the game of chess. So does that still kind of give you that chess aspect to it when you play it?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I really like the scenario elements as like a player personal thing because they're kind of infinitely customizable. Um, Instead of the Neopre zones, like you're saying, you can kind of put anything on those bases and you can kind of make it your own. So I see players going off the rails with that kind of thing and just making all kinds of objective markers that are weird and neat. And Eric is going to have some weird Grimkin shit, I'm sure. From a playing perspective, there are a couple rules that feel dead in the game right now, ambush being one of them. I think with how spread out some of these scenarios are, even if ambush doesn't feel like a great rule right now, if you're a ranged model and some of these zones are within inches of the side of the board, I think ambush comes back into play like a lot. Just from playing these scenarios, I mean, I've been playing a little bit of Brine Bloods, and these boarding party are generally, I've got one unit ambushing off the side of the board, and it's pretty effective.
I was actually thinking the same thing with Selena and her Nis Hunters for Dawn Guard. So because that I think it's their range 12 bow, power 10, but they have like CRA, so you can just park them off to the side and they can just take some pot shots. And if you have your infiltrate card, you can just end up sticking that on them. So if you have a gun, maybe you might be in range, you can walk over, or you just stay there, get your point, but then you're going to go get peppered by this unit that might potentially score the zone. So I think ranged ambushing units are going to be very, very strong with that change. And I agree with that.
Yeah, the other thing I've noticed is, I mean, in Mark IV, a lot of your infantry is coming in more of a combined arms aspect. A lot of things that hit in melee also might have like a pistol of some kind. So there's a lot of like optional shooting. Legacy doesn't have a lot of that, so it can kind of feel really bad as, like, say if you're a Protectorate player and you have no guns to speak of, you have to sit a unit off to the side somewhere away from the battle just scoring, and they can't really do anything. It doesn't feel great to do that. So I think with how spread out they are, there's some Mark IV-ness to it that some of the legacy stuff might not feel as good playing on.
Yeah. Hey, Erica, how about you? What are your thoughts on the overall change?
So I think I had mentioned it at the start. So I think as for tournament organizers and those that run events, so that was kind of a scary thought for me is like, oh, okay, so we spent money to get these zones to play the past couple of years. It's like, okay, well, what does that look like in a Mark IV Steamroller environment? Do we have to go and replace everything? So I think it's cool to have the players bring their own elements, and the fact that we have the dimensions and measurements for it, like Andy was alluding to earlier. People can customize what they want to bring. So thank you, PP, for that. The other things I really like is I like using your flag to be able to tag a terrain piece. I think that's really fun and kind of changes up regardless what scenario you're playing. You're going to get something different every time. I like the increase of terrain. I think at our store with Delaware War Machine, we've kind of made it a point to include additional terrain on the field, definitely with the lethality of guns in this edition and how units move. Definitely line of sight blocking is super important in this edition, so I think it was smart for the terrain increase. The things that I am not too sure about or I'm on the fence on is the moving scenario pieces, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit later. I think I don't know if it's going to be too much for players, but I think having the scenario elements do different things depending on what scenario you're playing on may cause confusion and not the execution of rules correctly. So I worry about that. Like too many variables, right? So we're changing, maybe it's too much. I'm not too sure. That's just a worry I have.
I think like what you're referring to is if we were to maybe, for example, we had bunkers, right? We know that the rectangular zone is scored by your Warcaster, battle engine, and a cohort model, right? But if like the rectangular zone in bunkers automatically gave you cover if you were inside of it versus the rectangular zone on spread the net did not.
Yeah, or not necessarily that, but like in sometimes this scenario element moves, other times it doesn't. So I think that could be confusing. The other thing I'm kind of wondering about is if this new Steamroller packet is going to make things like structures relevant. Because we know the community, right? Like whenever we run anything, we always put it to a vote. Hey guys, do you want to play the bunkers and guard towers as written, or are they just obstructions? And I don't think we've run an event where we've played them as rules as written. So maybe with the flag tagging, but I do think that maybe the buildings need a little bit more revision or work before they'll be accepted on a grander scale in a competitive format.
I remember the situation with WTC was that it was about availability and that they needed to have it painted. I think that was the reason why like WTC. At least that's what I heard. I don't know if that was actually the correct.
I don't know. I think
outcome
the
for that.
buildings, like the rules, are still divisive at that competitive play, especially for legacy armies. It's that it can be a bit of a struggle on how to deal with these buildings, especially since you have to. Whenever I've played with them, on average, I'm investing a heavy and a half to take one of them down.
Yeah, I think they're closer than people think. The structures, I just think they're generally just too durable. Like, I think they just need to be toned down their durability a little bit, and I think that would go a long way.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Dan, what about you? What are your thoughts on the new Steamroller?
I think there's a lot to like here. My first impressions are that the language that we've been used to for the current Steamroller for so many years is probably going to be changing. And that's something we need to adapt to as a player base. War Machine, one thing I love about it, has a very codified, very structured language model to it. And specific words mean very specific things. And the words that are not on the page are often as important as the ones that are. So as a community, we're going to get really like a lot more familiar with the tactics of moving something toward, but not directly toward, an opponent's board edge in the case of these objectives that we're moving up and down the field, as Erica had mentioned. I think that I'm excited to see what this does for the pacing of the game, because there were a lot of early criticisms about Mark IV that saw some people talking about there's like a flashpoint moment where turn 2 or 3, you throw oil and fire in the pan and everything explodes, and then there's like 2 more turns after that where both armies are just kind of limping away from the fight. I'm hoping that the positioning of some of these scenario elements as they change and as they can be moved around the board by players will change some of that and adjust the pace at which conflicts happen across a more protracted game. I'm not saying I want to play every game for 2 hours straight exactly, but it would be nice to see more tactics and strategies develop that require you to have longevity built into your army. I think that's something that many lists don't consider these days, and I'd be interested to see if that crops up more. I'd also like to see if this helps address some of the first player syndrome, where the positioning of flags or friendly objectives that can move around and things like that can help the second player score things safely enough that they don't get pushed out of scenarios. And there's a lot of dials they can turn and adjustments they can make in that area to help massage that and make it a little bit more palatable. And finally, I always had this like huge anxiety about accidentally losing 5-0 on a scenario at the bottom of turn 2. And the new scoring paradigm where a player may only win at the end of the opponent's turn, if they're still ahead by 3, is huge for me. And I'm really excited to see how that changes the game and alleviates some of the pressure of trying to contest scenario elements while not losing your entire army in the process.
I'm a little torn on that last point because, when it comes to those big scenario wins, like I've had to change the way I play a lot because attrition-wise, you can go balls to the wall to try and score a lot of points in this packet, but if you go too far and you just give up on attrition and your opponent can kind of just clap back and say, okay, I can do enough not to lose on scenario, you basically lose the game because you went too hard trying to win on scenario too early. So I feel like slow playing scenario is going to become a bigger strategy than those 5-0 victories.
Yeah, and I like to see that because that forces more interaction between players and models over a longer period of time.
You don't have that big I win moment either, where it's you end your turn, you've succeeded, you've pressed the button, and you win. You kind of have to. You don't have that big moment anymore for scenario.
Right, but what you do get is the evil villain syndrome, where someone ends their turn and goes, "Mwahaha! I'm up by more than 3 points. Let's see if you can defeat me."
I've had my fair share of being scored 5 points on one turn where we had games of Mirage, and I even think maybe Spread the Net or King of the Hill or something like that, where it's just, you played sloppy or you made a miscalculation, like, oh, okay, cool, that's fun. So I like the idea about being able to react to at least stay into the game. And Andy, you and I can talk about one of our games later on, but at least for some of the main things, I like the scoreable terrain. I think the change of flags into scoreable terrain is pretty neat, specifically from a table design. And this is where my thought goes with it. What is it? 5 inches, 4 inches? What is the distance that the terrain has to be? It's 5 inches. Okay. So, like, you might have a flag located on a table that there's only one piece of terrain that's within 5 inches, and guess what? It's towards your opponent.
Then you would just keep it as the flag. Then you wouldn't.
Yeah, players have the option of not selecting a terrain feature. If there are no valid terrain features within 5 inches of a flag, as it's listed on your scenario map, then the flag does not move. But even if there are points within 5, I think the player has the option of just leaving the flag where it lies, and they don't have to select a terrain feature. So if the flag itself is in a more advantageous position, go nuts.
I think you leave it as a small obstacle or something like that.
Okay, but then, all right, so then I missed that, so oops. But it still kind of goes back to my other point where it's that, okay, so it's either going to be that one option that's closer to your opponent, then you just keep it as your flag, versus the other side, you have the opportunity of pulling it back towards you, so it's easier to be protected. And what I just like about that is that it actually is going to go and make that decision of who's going to be first player and then who's going to be second player to choose sides, right? So I think that that's very compelling as an opportunity to really engage in the game, as well as for TOs to really be able to flex their muscles and being able to make some very dynamic maps.
I'm always in,
hey guys,
in favor
I'm just rereading that section on flags, and I think we got it wrong.
Did we?
So it is compulsory. If a scenario has a flag marked before deployment, starting with player 1, choose a piece of terrain within 5 of the 20 millimeter flag. There is no may in that sentence, so you must select a terrain feature. It could, in fact, be disadvantageous if the only valid terrain feature within 5 of your flag is toward your opponent. It makes it much easier for them to contest and harder for you to score safely.
Yeah, that's scary.
Regardless, though, what I'm saying is that you're really going to have to go pay attention to your sides. And it's not just like, I want to stay over here. Like, no, you might actually want to go over to the other side. So that way you have a better chance of being able to, keep your flag safe at that point. So
I think there's a bit of awkwardness about this getting to the table and putting your stuff on the field now. The way I see the order of operations is I set up, next to my or across from my opponent, right? We discuss our armies and we look at the terrain on the board. But since I've brought my, as Andy said, infinitely customizable scenario elements, I want to use them on my side of the field, right? So how do I go and set up the terrain to set up my objectives to try and determine if I want one side of the board or the other when that dice roll happens? Because if I choose to go second, or if I've lost the roll and I'm going second, and I say I want to be on the other side of the board, but all of my scenario objectives have just been deployed on this side because I happen to be standing here. Now I have to pick those up, move over there, remeasure because I want my stuff on my side of the board because they're cool and they look like my army guard. Gosh darn it. This from an event organizer or TO perspective could be a negative. I'm wondering if we are going to get like tiny little bases just to leave on every table. And then these are the things that you just throw out there. Here's some red ones, here's some blue ones. And then when you've decided your table sides, then you can put your little objectives on top of them.
I mean, I agree with you that it could become a problem between players, but I think it just has to be worked out between players. If worst case scenario is you deploy your objectives and then you switch them up.
Yeah. It's just another consideration in the few minutes that you have to decide your list, before a game.
I think it's still net faster because we see now with the current scenario packet and with players like either leaving their models on the table. At least with this, it's like take everything off. Like if I'm coming to the table to play, I'm probably not putting my scenario elements out there until I know what side of the table I'm playing on, because it's going to be like eventually after playing these scenarios, we're going to get used to like roughly the measurements of like, oh, okay, this is roughly where the flag is going to go. This is roughly where the cache is going to go, where we'll be able to come to a table, look at it and be like, oh, okay, like this side would be more advantageous to me.
Or we could just have our own 20 millimeter widgets, and you just put your 20 millimeter widget on and be like, okay, that's where these are. What does it look like over on that side? Or just set it up, have your flag's there. Okay, this flag stays still, and that flag's going to be a wall back there. I'm going to go choose that side. I'm going to go throw my flag over here, like remeasure your flag. I think we're turning into a bigger issue than it really is.
Yeah, I agree. I think, but just leave it between the players. I mean, as a TO for current Steamroller, it's, you're trusting your players to set up the new scenario after they're done their game, and as people who run the game, that
y'all
there's
don't
always
do
a couple
that.
tables that aren't set up for the next
Yeah.
round. So just having it be regimented that you're carrying your scenario from table to table and you're setting it up at the beginning of your game, it kind of regiments that it's always going to be the same. Instead of, sometimes you'll come to that table, it's like, oops, somebody didn't set up this scenario, so you have a disadvantage of an extra 5 minutes between everybody else.
Yeah. Now, there's one other thing that I think we already talked about, the moving elements as like being something drawing, or at least Erica, you mentioned that which one do they move and other ones that they don't move. I won't say it's an issue that I have, but a challenge is that I can't big brain like plays like this, and I feel like there's going to be some really highly competitive players that are going to be able to move scenario elements in a way to set them up way better for positioning that's going to be beyond me. And like moving something in a specific direction to block like a landing spot for like a heavy or some contesting model, or one that can maybe like attrition you, because it's not going to be able to land in the spot to go and engage with your model.
Yeah, this brings up Dan's point earlier too, where it's so some of these scenarios are you move something towards your opponent's backline, right? But the letter of the law says you could move that 2.5 inches laterally and a half inch forward, and that's towards your opponent's backline. So you could just be taking that to the side of the board basically, or towards the center where you can contest it more easily. Like it's the moving scenario elements are hard for me, just because like there's so many more pieces on the board that can get in the way. Like if you have a full unit in front of it, like how does it interact with the unit? Does it move straight through them? Does it land on top of them? And now you have the rule of least disturbance. Like I don't know how clearly that's spelled out.
All right, so we'll talk about yeeting the objectives up. I think we've already talked about our thoughts about this. So what do you guys think about just talking about? Unless anybody has any other final things, you want to just talk about each one of the scenarios and give our thoughts about it. So the first one was Recon Mark IV. So Recon Mark IV has 2 caches. If you didn't know, cache is a 20 millimeter objective that is scoreable once. It's like a box that you pick up. So you pick up the box, you score it once, and it's basically like an objective. Instead of destroying it, like an objective that we're thinking about, it's an objective that you're picking up and then you just score for the turn, and it's good. And I think you have to sacrifice your combat action, so you can't just run up and pick it up. You have to actually have a model walk on up in there to pick it up, which is pretty cool.
Can I jump in real quick about caches?
Yeah, sure.
So, yeah, you're right about the scoring mechanics there, and I think that there's some really interesting and unique interactions with movement in War Machine for these caches. So, one thing is that units are incredible at scoring caches because you can move one guy, place someone else, and then that other guy that got placed next to the cache can forfeit his combat action and score something. But to counteract that, there's another interesting thing. To sacrifice your combat action, you can't charge. So if a unit were to charge and then a guy gets placed next to it, he's already used both his movement and combat action as part of his charge. He will not be able to score the cache. And that's what I'm talking about when it comes to things like the codified language in this document. A lot of these changes are going to be really, really subtle, and they're going to take a lot of time for us to, swallow these pills.
Yeah, I certainly felt very smooth brain trying to sort through this packet. I had to read it at least 5 or 6 times before I felt like I understood what the hell was going on.
And that exposure to the language is going to be very important, I think. I recommend anyone keen on playing this read it several times.
And then when you think you got it, read it again.
Because we still don't got it. We're still making mistakes currently during this cast.
Yeah. All right. So we got that. We got 2 flags. We already talked about the flags. And then you got 2 objectives. They look like they're 30 mil. And the 30 mils are scored by solos and leaders, right? That's how they work. I remember 50s are the big, are your jacks. 40s are your units, and 30s are solos.
Yeah, this is by far
And
the
Warcraft's
simplest
are
scenario.
Yeah.
I think it's a little dead.
It doesn't jump out at
Yeah.
me. Like, looking at it, I'm not really super enthusiastic. It just,
I mean, think about it. Compare it to something like Spread the Net that also looks something like this. Spread the Net has a circle zone,
Bunkers. It
2
looks like
rectangles, and 2 flags, as well as 2 objectives. Like, after the caches go, there's only 4 scoreable pieces in this entire board. There's not a lot.
But I mean, Dan just said it's kind of like bunkers.
We're still in scenario
it is
1,
like
right?
bunkers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's the cache? Is that the
cache
square?
is the square.
Yeah, it's the square.
Yeah, it's
Oh
the
my
square.
god, that's another thing
So
we
it's
have
like
to
the-
use too. That they put new symbols on these maps. I'm lost, completely lost.
At least triangles are still triangles. It was always triangles.
Yeah,
right?
I think
For
Andy
flags.
and
These
I,
flags are still triangles.
Andy and I, we've played this one a few times now, and I don't think anyone's won from score. I think we've either killed each other or we've been to like all the way to the end of the game and had to calculate scoring.
Yeah, this feels like a bunker scenario where everyone's kind of passively scoring their own stuff. And then, once in a while, someone's going to squeak one guy in to contest, and then it'll maybe shift the game. But you're right. I don't think you're going to see any scoring blowouts in this kind of scenario if both of the players are on the same wavelength and understand everything that's going on.
Yeah, and the way that works now is like, oh, I contested your zone, you didn't contest mine, now I'm up by 1. Okay, if I do that and trick you 2 more times, and then you don't do it again, and we get to before turn 7, maybe I'll win on scenario. It's like it's a big ask to win on scenario on this one, I think.
I know, but I think that's the best part about this is because it is going to be good at forcing that protracted battle that we were talking about. Knowing that it's going to be difficult to maintain and capture a scenario win means that you need to have an eye on what pieces you're preserving towards the end of the fight and the end of the game, and how you can leverage different parts of your army to perform different roles and like rotate them forward and start to apply support units to engagements and things.
This
is going to be really important.
This scenario to me is whoever wins on attrition wins the scenario. Essentially, that's the only way you can actually win on scenario on this one is if you decimate your opponent's army to the point where they just can't be on the board anymore.
The other thing I'm also seeing is that because of how scoring is working now, is that maybe gunlines might have a little bit an easier time playing the game. Because now, since if you go take a look, right, it seems a little wide, and normally your gunlines would like to sit back and shoot at everything, so they can probably shoot at the opponent's 30 mil solos that are keep on trying to score, maybe until they throw the Warcaster up there, and then you may not be able to shoot them off, or possibly you could just do a ranged assassination at that point. But I think that something like this, you're right, it's going to be a relatively slow game until somebody makes a mistake and then ends up getting shot up on the board. Because at most, you're only going to be probably scoring 2 points a turn, maybe 3 if you end up getting the cash, but then your opponent is probably going to be able to prevent you.
Yeah, you have 1 turn of maybe 3, and if you're scoring 3 at any point and not when you're not doing the cash, you've probably won the game.
Well, let's go look at one that's a little bit more exciting. So the battle lines. So the battle lines has a one where what do we got here? We got 230 objectives, 240 objectives, and then the 2 flags. So the neat thing about this is that it says at the end of each scoring turn, that turn's player must choose and move one of any player's objectives 3 inches towards, again, it's not directly towards, but towards their opponent's table edge. You may not choose the same objective your opponent chooses the previous turn. So the idea, what is this, is that I can push, so if I'm player 1, I can push the player 2's 40 mil 3 inches towards me.
No, the opposite.
No, the
You have to
opposite,
push
towards your
something
opponent.
Towards them. It's always pushing away from you.
Okay, so then I'm pushing their 40 away from them?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what I see happening here is you trying to push any one of the objective. I might even push my friendly objective maybe closer to the middle of my board, so that way the support solo that I threw out there last turn to capture it can now move closer into my army, support my army, and capture the element. I might try to centralize my things while pushing my opponent's things away from each other and decentralizing his army.
You could even do the opposite. If, say, you have like a cheap stealth solo on that 30 mil towards the edge, you just push it towards the edge of the board and make your opponent try and come get you if they want to contest that on your own friendly objective. Like, you're just pushing that. You're just stretching the board at that point.
If that first scenario was our neutral palate cleanser, this is the dish that brings the spice, because now we're seeing the big brain plays that Paul was talking about with moving these objectives around.
Yeah, there are at all times 6 things to score on the table at all times.
Did you, would anything ever happen if you were to push the objective? Because it says 3 inches towards. So let's say if I push this 40, 3 inches towards player 2's deployment, and let's say that there is a heavy or some model directly on top of that, am I just moving it then 3 inches anyway in that direction for it to find a legal landing spot?
This is what I'm not sure of. I don't know how this interacts with models on the board. Like, if you say I push this 3 inches and there's no legal landing spot for this objective, I don't know how that works. I don't know if the packet clarifies that.
It's actually written that on the first page.
This is why I'm smooth-brained.
So where is it? If a scenario calls for the objective to move, the objective ignores models and terrain when doing so, as long as it has the movement to move completely past any model or obstacle that would prevent its final placement.
But okay, so what if you have enough pieces that prevent its final placement?
Then it cannot move through them.
Yeah, so say I choose to push this
before moving.
Yeah, so say I choose to push this objective 3 inches, it can go nowhere. Does it still count as have been pushed?
I would say yes.
Yeah, I would say yes
because
too.
a model can get pushed. If a model is pushed up to an inch, but it only gets pushed the tiniest fraction of an inch because there's something behind it, it still counts as being pushed.
I'm worried if you were to use the rule of least disturbance with the objective being the primary piece, I could see that being extremely exploitative. If you're pushing
goofy,
other
weird charge angles off of that, and that
in a
scares
world
me.
with TK and all kinds of pools, I could see people exploiting a rule like that to push an opponent's piece in additional inch or
in
two.
general, I don't want the objectives to interact with models, so I'm glad that clause is in there. Thanks, Dan.
I agree, and I like this version of that interaction. To be honest with you guys, I think the rule of least disturbance is my least favorite rule in the entire rulebook, and it has been ever since 2010. It's no one can ever remember how it works, and the awkwardness of having to shove a bunch of well-painted models, off to the side and then rotate this one so that fits down in there, and it's just the worst.
But we like using throw power attacks, Dan. Come on.
That's right, I do.
But I'll say it, throws are terrible now.
I do the throw power attack and then I just go dodge.
Yeah, the fact that throws you cannot target anything. Throws have to go directly away makes throws a lot less.
And it's D6. It's not even that. Sometimes you roll a 1 or a 2.
Yeah,
and it don't matter.
Is that I really prefer the type of movement and interaction where a model that is moving should never be able to overlap or interfere with a model that is stationary. That is the way you get the cleanest game state when you're playing for things.
Yeah, I like the visual of a big old heavy going bowling and bowling another heavy through a unit. That's funny to me. I enjoy that.
Yeah, I think that needs to be in the game, but if we can make it as rare as possible for those really stylistic moments, I think that's where it would thrive a little bit better. I think this is as written.
We're getting a little off topic on the scenario.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you want to chat about Wolves at Our Heels, where this is the most involved.
Yeah, this one has a very special rule attached to it that I really like the idea. I just don't know how. I've only played this a handful of times, so I don't know how this is gonna end up at the end.
This is the one that I've seen the most players make the most mistakes about so far.
I'm one of those players.
I had so much fun with this one. All right, so it's the 250s, so those are your warjacks, 240s, which are your units, and then the 2 caches. As for the warjacks ones, the 50s are located in the middle, so you're trying to get your battle group there in the middle, while you have a unit off to the side. Now, what's happening is that if you score the 40 mil, whoever scores it, it moves. It says 3 inches what does it say? It says moves 3 inches towards so not directly towards, but towards the opponent's edge. Okay, the wording of this is weird. At the end of the scoring turn, when a player controls either 40 millimeter objective after scoring victory points, what was this? It was where am I reading it?
Basically,
if the player's 40 millimeter objective is closer to their opponent's board edge than their opponent's 40 millimeter objective is from the player's board edge, at the end of the second player's fourth turn, they score 3 victory points.
Yeah, that's it. It's a lot. Yeah.
Let's just recap real quick. There are 3 things that you can score in this scenario, but only 2 of them are live on most turns of the game. The first one is scoring a zone / objective, right? Score the 50 millimeter items, score the 40 millimeter items. Okay. The second one is you can capture that cache, right? You capture your opponent's cache, that scores you 1 point. And the third bullet point you can score is only available precisely at the end of the third turn.
Says, is it fourth turn?
Zooming in.
Second player's fourth turn.
Yeah, is precisely available at the end of the second player's fourth turn, and that's it. So most of the time, you're just fighting over these zones. But that last bullet point is worth 3 points instead of 1. So you want to be the person to win that race.
The biggest mistake I've seen, and I've committed so far on this, is if you're the second player, and say you score bottom of 2, and you must move that 40 mil zone up.
And you yeet it
so
away.
easy. Yeah, it's so easy to not score
scored.
it on your opponent's turn if they can't contest it. Like it
it
just leaves you.
Yep.
And now you're like, oops.
No, Andy and I played a game. You had your Vengers, and I had my Ultra Axers. They just threw the objective 40 inches. They just looked at it like, oh, we f***ed up.
Cool. I guess we'll get there next turn. Sorry. All right. Bye.
But so I guess like for me, it's the wording of just how that works is if you're closer to your opponent's edge than they are to yours. It feels very, very busy for just saying measure the 40 mil from the player's side. Whoever's is longer gets
these 40 mils are very awkward because here's how you want to do this. You want to put your entire unit in front, further from the 40 mil than you, so that you can score next turn if your opponent can't contest it, right? However, you're getting in the objective's way and you're limiting where it can be. So you have to be really careful. You want to put all of your models in the way because they all have to be, your whole unit has to be within 3 inches of where you're going to put the objective. But now you have almost nowhere to put your objective if you put a full unit in front of it.
They all have to be within 2 inches. So the 2 ways that I think we've seen this. 3 ways?
No, 3 inches. Scoring.
It's 3 inches. It's 3 inches.
Right?
It's 2 inches for the flags.
It's only 2 inches for flags.
This is hard.
3 inches.
This is so hard.
Yeah.
3 inches for the 40 is that the 2 ways that I found this is that you make like a conga line where you put like 2 guys on one like vertical and 3 guys on the other, and they're just like they're passing it forward, right? That will get you 2 turns in a row. Or when Andy says that you put them in front of the objective, all within 3 inches, and then you get a legal landing spot so that they're all going to be within 3 inches when it moves.
It just feels so janky and metagamey to try and like get this all to work. It just doesn't.
I don't think it's even
I just love yeeting up the objective.
I don't think it's even that difficult. You can score it twice in a row with just the same unit pretty easily. What you want to try and do is say you have a unit of 3 guys, like the Winter Corps Arcanist. They're going to be my backline support unit. They're going to be back here off in the corner, powering up my jacks and scoring this thing. If you put the back guy touching the objective and the 2 other guys directly in front of him, when that thing moves straight forward 3 inches, it will have not left a 3-inch radius from the guy in the back that was previously base to base with it. He can rescore, and so can the other 2 guys in the unit.
Dan, I'm not sure whether you're aware of this, but I'm playing Brian Bloods now, so I have 6-man medium base units.
Sucks to be you.
5 man.
6-man. They all have attachments, Paul.
This is one of the other things that I thought was going to change army composition. I'm really curious to see what this does to change up what people are considering bringing in their armies. As you had said, maybe I need those small base guys now instead of the medium base unit in order to make sure I can more easily score some of these finicky elements.
Yeah, it does not feel this particular scenario feels really, really finicky. Like it just feels very metagamey to try and make these 40 mils work and get up the board efficiently.
So here's a question for the panel. So I think we can safely say, or that we've all been on the receiving end of this. Thank you, Rick. So infantry like sumo push lists. Do you think these scenarios help deal with some of the issues we're seeing with, your opponent just flooding the board with dudes, especially if they get to go first?
I think Recon does.
Can. Before we get off Wolves at the Heels, I'm sorry, Erica, but we also need to address there's one more scoring thing. Right? This is the scenario where it's like there's an existential threat behind your army, and the kill box advances at the end of the first player's turn every turn.
I forgot about that.
Right? So it's like it's squeezing you into the middle of the board. And I've seen a lot of people raise up arms about this, but I want to throw this out there. I feel like some players aren't considering the previous scenario packet, wherein you'd start on either end of the field, and then generally speaking the game will end up rotating to the left or the right as the armies clash, and oftentimes your warcaster is kind of up and onto the side of the board anyway. This is effectively doing that, but it's a little bit more punishing to those casters that want to stay further back. So long as you have a constant mind towards, I need to be moving kind of up and diagonally to make sure that I'm still in this game, I'm not risking the kill box, I think this will feel a lot like it has felt before, and we won't see too many players after the first tournament or so getting caught by this mechanic.
Yeah, I think the kill box mechanic of this is relatively benign. Like it has to be in your head, but it's not something that's game breaking. And like you said, Dan, it's encouraging you to flip the board, which is very doable as long as you're doing it with your whole army and not just eating your caster up the board.
Okay, so back to Erica's question, right? About I'm sorry, teacher, what was the question?
The infantry sumo push list that
right.
can be very difficult.
I think
for
this
armies to deal
scenario,
with.
Wolves at your heels, is very vulnerable to that. I think if your opponent makes it so that you can never move your 40 mil by choking you off the scenario, and you're not able to contest theirs, I think they can push you off scenario by turn 4. Can't be by turn 2 at least, so it gets you a chance to play the game and chew through their army. So
This is where I go back to what you were saying with ambushing, where because it's 8 inches off, and again going off with your Selena's or your pig boarding party, I really do see that these ambushing models are probably going to be in a lot more lists. And I'm even thinking like my Reaver skirmishers, like I don't use them. I don't like to use them. I don't think that they've been compelling to use, but they might actually be somewhat useful in this world.
Oh yeah, if you can get a whole unit to tie up a whole bunch of dudes that are in that 40 mil that are trying to push that 40 mil forward, now that whole plan is out the window until they can clear that up again.
So another thing
I mean,
is,
that's the thing. They could just be there as like bodies that you have to clear up, or they can just be there as in like, okay, you can't deal with me, but if you want to move your guys up that 3 inches so that it moves up, or you know what I mean, like now you're going to be in charge range, and I'm going to go and deal with you. So good job.
I think that you have a good point about ambush. I'm not sure how effective they're going to be in the grand scheme of things, but it's certainly valid to put 3 to 4 points of your army points dedicated towards, on one of these 6 scenarios in this packet, I'm going to have a 3-point unit that slows down this 40 millimeter on my opponent's end and lets me score those 3 points on turn 4.
I think they're good on battle lines
too. If that's
too.
all they do, they will have paid for their points, in my opinion.
I think they're good on battle lines too. That 40 mil unit scoreable is only 9 inches from the edge, so you're going to have pieces that are going to be really close to ambush range that are going to be vulnerable on those sides.
I agree. I'm just saying that I don't think they even need to kill something to make it worthwhile in this new packet.
Depending on how long they survive, yeah.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to point out earlier, because Erica used the example of Rick's army. I think he runs it's like 2 Storm Blades and 3 Storm Guard. Right, he's got 5 units, but those are all workhorse melee units. And if he has to take one of those and sit them way back on that 40 mil, that takes a lot of the pressure off of that side of the board.
I think he's switched it up. I think he's got 6 units, and I think one of those units is the spray guys.
Okay. Well, regardless, it may force the Signar players to put the spray guys in if they hadn't before, because now they'll want something that has a ranged attack and can sit back there.
Oh no, spray 14 is my favorite.
They're risking pulling things away from their front lines, just to be scoring. And that's not an efficient use of your 7-point, melee unit.
Yeah, I'm just interested to see what units are going to be, or what models are going to be more used now. I mean, like I'm thinking like of my Ultra Barragers, or just throwing like one of my heavies with the AoE guns just in an area, just so that way you can kind of take out the people from.
Yeah,
the
there does seem to be a theme
like
with the Mark IV armies where the heavier units that are heavier shooting tend to be very short ranged shooting. Like your Ultra Barragers are what, like only range 10?
12s.
So like maybe they have a use where they don't have to be shooting every turn, but they're only a 3-man unit, I think, right? And so they can score off to the side pretty easily, and if somebody does come in, they can start shooting, I guess.
They can start blasting them. Yeah, because they can actually hit something. They stay still. No, I don't know. I like the direction. I mean, just like with these three little images, it's a taste of seeing things, right? We're seeing things we've never seen before. I haven't seen scenario elements moving. I haven't seen a kill box shrinking while actually playing. Like just those two things, I think they're trying a lot of new things, which is really nice, and it's a palate cleanser. As from Erica was saying earlier, just the flat neoprene zones. This is a welcome change. It's very different. It's very jarring, but like it's good. I like this is what I wanted.
From a personal level, I can't tell. Like it feels overly complex to me, but that might just be the newness of it. Like I need more reps to figure out like whether this is actually like overly complex compared to what we're used to.
Yeah, and then there's one point that I wrote this down, but this doesn't really apply anywhere. But if you go take a look at all three of the scenarios, they're all mirrors, right? You can see the 50s and the 40s, mirroring each other, the 40s and 30s mirroring each other, right? I'm just wondering what other options are there where, and this kind of will actually segue into like the scenario sets, but it's like, what if you have a scenario where it's like there's two 50s on one board edge and two 30s on another board edge? You know what I mean? And like you can decide which board edge you want depending on what you want.
Yeah, the asymmetric board. So we see a little bit of that design in the Black Tide series. So I think we've actually done a couple battle reports, and Pete and Rick did one, and Pete had an extra, he was the defending and went second, and he had an extra scenario piece on his side to protect that gave him an easier thing to score that Rick didn't have on his side of the table. I like that asymmetric design because then it's go first or take side, or maybe you tailor a list to be more defensive. I think you
have to be
very
really careful with those types of mechanics, though. I think it's like it's such a slippery slope. Giving the second player an extra thing to score can, yes, alleviate some of that first player syndrome, but it can really quickly unbalance the second player's advantage as well, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a dial that you have to kind of key on. Go ahead.
No, I agree with Dan in that if you make it too easy for the second player, the choice never becomes to pick first in that scenario, and you don't want that. But I do really like the idea of these asymmetric scenarios. I'm hoping we see more of those ideas in the next set of scenarios.
Yeah, what I wouldn't mind seeing for asymmetry is to have the first player's objectives be pushed further forward towards the center of the board, and the second player's objectives reined in a little, so that they're easier for the second player to score while having to acquire less board space. I think that, and yet keeping the amount of scoring available to both players even, at least at the start of the game, is maybe a better way to accommodate that, because it's still fair. If we stay on our side, so to speak, we can still get the same number of points, but as first player, I have to push a little bit harder to get to those points.
I like Paul's idea.
As a second player,
I like Paul's idea too of the variety of different objective zones can be sort of like you got 250 mils on one side or 230 mils on the other side, and you get to choose which one is more advantageous to you. So you don't have a lot of scoreable solos, and you really want those 50 mils.
Add another element to it. If you score the opposite side, you get like extra points. You know what I mean? So like it forces you. No, but I mean like that'd actually be kind of cool. It's like are you going to hunker down with your warjacks and play the long game, or are you going to go and try to bum rush with units and try to get the score on the other side? I don't know. Like,
the fact is,
I think that'd right. Now that everything is color coded, like I have my objectives and you have your objectives, you could easily put in like after turn 4, or turn 4 and onwards, scoring your opponent's objective is worth 2 points instead of 1. Like, things get really escalated at the end of the fight or something.
I like that idea
There's
a lot,
of
actually.
things that could change.
It's just, I mean, you're forcing things to happen. It makes people list build in a different way. And I think what'd be cool about it is like, okay, so this list, of my list pair, this one is designed to hunker down on, bunkers Mark IV, or this is designed in order to weather the storm to get up on bunkers 4, and it just, I think it would really make some very interesting list. But again, I'm not a game designer. I have no idea if that would even work or not. I'm just like spitballing ideas. But this actually brings me up to one other point. And this actually gets us to our third point about, I guess, getting the stuff and TOs and EOs and stuff. So from what we've seen is that you have the cash and you have the flag, which are 220s, and you got a 30, 40, and a 50. The intent is that, and I know the Brine Blood scenario said they had them at like Gen Con. I know we had them at Nova. I think Tony is having them for his PAX Unplugged thing. Are these... Is the intent that we're going to be having these ourselves, or is it that the TOs and EOs are going to be... Because has there been any guidance on that? I think you were saying that it's going to be on us, right? But then where I'm getting at is, well, what if we play a scenario with 350 mils? Who supplies that? Do I have to go and supply my own now?
I don't think that would be a thing if it's a set. Like, so if a set comes with one of each and a cash and a 20, I don't foresee that.
I don't know, because this is where you can get the stuff, and obviously these sets that are available at these conventions are matching the scenario set, so I'm guessing that's the direction that they're going. I guess where I'm getting at is that, okay, you get one set, but then if they want to explore other steamrollers and have more caches or have more flags, well, you're going to have to get an additional set.
Or you just use a penny.
You know what I mean?
I'm saying, like, you just proxy it. I mean, I don't think it's that.
It's true.
I don't think
true.
it's that difficult to, respond to a change like that.
Yeah, with
Is a penny 20 millimeters in diameter?
Pretty sure it is.
Google it.
I swear to God, if America
today
used
I
a
learned
20 millimeter
about it.
coin, I'm gonna be like, what the hell? What are we doing, guys? we already died on this hill. Why are we going millimeters on a penny? Hold on. What's the size of a penny?
Isn't it 20 millimeters?
I don't know.
It's like Dan's poker chips that are like just right at 40
Man of War
millimeters
poker
or
chips, that's right.
Perfect.
I don't play with models anymore. I have just a bunch of orange circles.
Yeah,
on the board.
pennies are 20 millimeters.
That's crazy.
It is 19.05 millimeters.
All right, whatever. You just round that shit up. It's all right. Like,
You've heard it here first, folks. The United States has finally found a use for its penny.
There's no good measurement. It's about 3/4 of an inch. Like it's about 3/4 of an inch.
Standard deviation applies.
Okay. It's a little smaller than 20 mils.
Okay.
or use your barrel. Use
Anyway,
your Donkey
so with
Kong
January
barrel.
quickly approaching, I would have assumed that these would be like in the store already. So I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, with how quickly we're supposed to be getting a new scenario packet in the new year, I'm assuming. So
Yeah, that's normally
as
how
of
it goes. When is but wait,
November 13th. It's 3 weeks. It's 3 weeks until December, right? 7 weeks until the end of the year. I want to see that. I want to see that solicitation, man. How much of these scenario elements gonna run me?
So I'm gonna go look this up because I know that we were talking about this. When's Captain Con?
February.
February. Like
February.
early February, I
Okay,
think.
so yeah, February 2nd to February 4th because I know that is that the first like War Machine convention that there's going to go be.
should be.
Okay, I'm just like wondering if everybody will be able to have their stuff in time for that, or if EOs or TOs are going to need to come up with a plan because you could easily repurpose your 30, 40, and 50 millimeter models as these flags and bases if you really needed to. It's not. It's not ideal. It's not, flavorful of like boxes of treasures and what have you. I guess the other challenge is trying to find their 20 mils, but I know it was on Amazon. I was able to find a bunch of like 20 mil bases that you're just able to go and buy, and they have like packs of 25. So that's not an issue, but it's definitely going to be like a challenge for however this ends up, whatever the rollout of this is going to go and be.
I still think it's cool that they're offering a product specifically geared toward their organized play packet. I think that's a smart idea because it helps the community understand that this part of the game is available and accessible, and it's a nice self-contained way for players to acquire their own supplies for playing in a tournament, and helps alleviate some of the concerns of the event organizer in gathering their community together. Because our community has been hurting so much since the pandemic, it's helpful for us to do everything we can to alleviate the cost of entry to having a group of players play together. This is a step in the right direction. Hopefully before long we'll get something like this in terrain. Because I know that a lot of people talk about the terrain rules, terrain placement, terrain sizes, and there was some chatter on the internet about how large the terrain was at the WTC. And I didn't see anything about terrain in the parts of the packet that had been teased so far, but the thing I'm crossing my fingers for is having slightly more terrain recommended to players at the start of the game, as well as having terrain be a bit more codified. Like, forests can only be so large, or a rough terrain template can only be so large, because I think that will help bring a lot of the organized play community into alignment with each other. And then we won't see players on the other side of the country having a drastically different experience than they do locally because of the differing types of terrain that get used.
See, I feel exactly the opposite. I like that you can go wildly differently sized for different types of terrain. Like, I don't want there to be I'm not at the highest level of, sporting of this, so I know anything that makes rules standardized probably makes their lives easier, but I would much rather not have guardrails and be hemmed in by saying things can only be this shape or this size. I would rather it kind of be up to the players, and I would hope that there's different experiences in different places. I like that.
I just don't want to see pockets where there's like no terrain on the field, or someone goes like, all right, here's a 10-inch forest. It's in the middle of the game, obscuring everything, and no one can draw line of sight to stuff. That's your one defining terrain feature, and there's a couple walls around it.
Yeah, but that's more on the TO, right? Like, I would, think of, like, if that's what someone's doing to run events, like, that just sounds like a lazy way to run events. Where if you're just throwing,
and if one table at that event is weird like that, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, like our train wreck table.
What I'm calling back to is the previous packet had 3 strict definitions for how terrain should be deployed onto the battlefield. There was scatter terrain method, there was quadrant terrain deployment method, and there was radial deployment method for terrain. We haven't seen that as part of this packet yet, but I really want that process to be made much more easy and much more accessible to event organizers, because more often than not, you just see people completely ignoring that page entirely.
Yeah, I do.
And whatever, I'm going to throw forest here, this there, that there, and that there. But like that can throw off how units interact and armies interact. And it can make some armies feel stronger than others in a vacuum. Because, maybe Storm Legion's really strong when they push you out of the battlefield, but if there were more obstacles in their way and they couldn't charge you all the time, this could be a completely different game for you. And I want to see that type of experience become more centralized for the player base. While, like you said, I want to mix it up with terrain every once in a while, but I don't want that to compromise the competitive focus of this packet. Because again, this is the competitive organized play packet. It is not necessarily the time to be overflowing with narrative on what these terrain features look like.
I'm just like looking up some stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing the ownership for these so getting back to what we're talking about though, for the scenario sets, I'm looking forward to people having the ownerships. I'm just worried though that this may seem like another burden to pick up. Like I know, like I kind of go back to the reception of defenses, where they were there and everyone kind of had that discussion of, oh, is this what everybody needs in order to go and be competitive? And I think that conversation has definitely like died down. You don't see that discussion happening anymore. I think the people who wanted defenses got them, who didn't want them didn't pick them up. But I don't want to see something similar happen to the objectives, where it's that I'm playing devil's advocate here, where they say, I don't want to get these objectives because I'm not going to go spend the $15, $20 on this set of pirate MacGuffins that don't match my own army, and there's not one that I have for my own army, so I'm just not going to go do that. And then that person will not go to those Steamrollers, those organized play events, and then that TO will be left with lower attendance. But then on the flip side of that, let's say that this is $20 for a set, that TO has to spend $40 to fuel a whole table. And with how many tables they have, that's going to become very, very expensive. And then they may look for cheaper alternatives where it's going to go be the neoprene zones the neoprene objectives. And then we're just kind of moving backwards to some of the problems that plagued Mark III organized play. That's, I guess, like where like my mind like going for devil's advocate.
You make a good point, especially because the defenses are entirely optional, right? If you're somebody like me, I mean, I have defenses, but I don't really build lists with defenses generally. I choose not to play them. They're not mandatory. These are mandatory if you're going to play in a Steamroller. So if it's expected of you to bring these, you have to make that one-time purchase. And that's that. I mean, I'm hoping that wouldn't be a deal breaker for people who are spending hundreds of dollars on these models, but it could be. It could be a problem for people to feel some kind of way about having to spend extra money just to be able to play in a tournament.
Pennies.
Yeah, or just proxy them because they're easily proxied.
I think it would be on brand for us to mention, if you're an event organizer, you have a community that you need to leverage here, right? It's not always going to be on you to have enough 30, 40, and 50 millimeter proxies, or pennies, as Erica had said, for all of these elements. Ask your, veteran players, I need your proxies. Bring them to the next tournament so we can run this. Rely upon the community around you and use each other to lift each other up.
Yeah, because we're certainly not going to buy 20 sets of these things.
Right. And we are, but pardon me, you will never be able to make everyone happy, especially not wargamers. Things are changing. Everyone's upset. But I think it's a step in the right direction, and I don't think it's out of the question for a player to also say, yes, I'm willing to spend a little bit extra money so that I can participate in organized play tournaments. I'm ready to step up to that level of my game, or I'm already there. So I understand as a player that engages in tournament play and competitive play that there is an aspect of this game I will have to spend a little extra money on, because now I'm entering a world where maybe I need 2 or 3 copies of that unit to beat the next guy in line, or I just know that it comes with the territory. I'm going to have to open my wallet one more time to maintain my competitive edge. That's just the nature of that, and I think that players that are actually committed to playing this game at this level will understand that and won't have an issue with it. I think we'll see some initial flash in the pan over the price point of these items, and then just like defenses, just like guard towers or bunkers, after a few weeks, it'll probably die down and smooth over.
Okay, well, I think we beat this horse as much as we're able to, so we can probably get it done unless anybody else has anything else that you wanted to make mention.
Horse is thoroughly beaten.
Yeah, I think horse is lying on the ground right
now. The beatings will continue until morale improves, Paul.
Right.
My sign-off is that this scenario packet is new and fresh. I'm really excited about it. I am excited to see all the big brain possibilities, and I want to get wombo comboed by someone moving objectives into a place where I wanted to put a warjack. I think it'll be a unique experience. It's the next level for the game, and I'm excited for it. Can't wait for January.
Yeah, ever since I've seen these, I haven't really had a desire to play the Mark III scenarios, just in the interest of trying to learn these and understand them and experiment with them. So they've got to be doing something right.
Yeah, same. I'm really optimistic and excited to see what's coming out. I think it's definitely where we see like the rules and some of these new armies that are coming out, like these scenario rules. I think it's a very exciting time for War Machine. I think PP, kudos to them. I think they're learning a lot as we're all moving through this process, and I would just encourage everyone to give them a try. And don't forget your pennies.
All right, cool. All right, well, with that, we'll go ahead and end this podcast episode, and we will catch you on the next one. We got a bat rep coming up if it's not already out. We'll see one of these Mark IV scenarios out there, and we will see you soon, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Tickets for Nova go on sale March 1st.